welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be 7 books that I think every high schooler should be reading or should read. And as a high school senior and having gone through the hardest parts of the senior year, which is like college applications and just submitting all your stuff, and thankfully I was accepted early, but after all that, I know that high school is no walk in the park. I know it is so stressful and just really crazy for some people who can't handle it, like me. But it also might be really awesome and one of the best years or some of the best years of your entire life, which I know for some people it is, for me not. But yeah, these are just some book recommendations that have saved me during my high school years, that have either taught me something that I needed to know in school, saved me from being stressful, and they're just relatable stories basically of other high schoolers in fiction, and they really give you that kind of wisdom in order to survive your high school career. So without further ado, I want to get into this video because it's going to be long. So the first book that I want to start out with is none other than a classic, and I am choosing The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Through your high school years, or even through your middle school years, you're going to be assigned books to read, and that's just protocol. I mean, if you're taking an English class, you're basically going to be given school-assigned books, and you might even be, even if you don't read this now, you're probably going to be assigned it anyway throughout your high school career, because let's just say this is like one of the most quintessential classic books out there. But I would say just read it if you haven't been assigned it, because it's one of those classic books that are actually really easy to read, really easy to understand, in my opinion, because I've read a lot of classic books that are just not, like, they're just so hard to get the meaning from. Like Jane Eyre, it is a good book and it is pretty self-explanatory, but the writing is just a little bit like difficult for me. So I think this one's very just simple. The writing style is simple, the story's easy to understand, it's interesting, and I think this is one of the classic books that will really get you to like classic books and to really be more open to reading other classic books. So that's why I'm recommending this, because I think when you read this book, you'll be like, oh, classic books can be really interesting and just really cool, and then you will want to read other books. You'll be more open to reading other books when you're assigned them in class. So I definitely recommend this one. It is one of my favorite classics of all time. So next here I have some young adult books that I think are super helpful for any high school teenager. It's also really good to get an open perspective on different lives of high school teenagers. And this one is Simon versus the Homo sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. I didn't just choose this because it does take place in high school. This is one of the few YA books that largely takes place in high school. I think that's because I've mainly been reading fantasy, and a lot of those books, even though the people in the books, like the characters, are high schoolers, it doesn't really take place in a high school, but this one actually does. It talks a lot about identity, acceptance, friendship, family. It talks a lot about all those really classic things that any high schooler can relate to. When I was writing my review for this, I said that it is one of the most relatable YA books. I think it's just follows kind of like a normal life, a normal day in a life of a high school teenager. And this also talks a lot about the LGBT community in high school, acceptance, trying to find your identity in high school, and how it can be hard when you're navigating through tons and tons of schoolwork and crushes, and you're still trying to find yourself, still trying to discover yourself. So I think this is a really awesome book, and yeah, it's basically been everywhere lately because of the movie, and I highly recommend the movie if you guys are going to watch it. And definitely read this book as well, because I thought it brought up some great tips, and it also just had some really good life lessons in it. The next book that I have here is To All the Boys I Loved Before by Jenny Han. This is also a really popular one, but I feel like people don't think about to read it during the most important parts of your high school career, that be like freshman year or whatever. The good thing I like about this one is that there are 3 books in this series, and all the way from the first one to the third one, you follow her in the third one when she's applying to colleges. She's in her last year of high school, and she's applying to colleges, and she's going through that really stressful time of college applications, which I feel like is something that is rarely reflected in books. So definitely you're gonna have to read this one to read the third one, but the third one does discuss that senior year really well. But yeah, this first one, I thought it dealt really well with talking about love, first love in high school. Same with Simon versus the Homo sapiens. That one talks a lot about first love, but this one talks a lot about our main character Laura Jean, who is navigating through high school but also through boy issues. So I just really love this one. It was also just so relatable, especially with the family aspect and the friend aspect, and just about, everyone feeling kind of awkward when they have their first crush. when they have their first crush. And I also thought this gave really cool tips into how to get over like a breakup. So in this story, Laura Jean basically writes love letters to all the boys that she's loved in the past, and then she puts them in a teal hat box and kind of locks them up. But in this story, those letters get revealed and sent to all the boys that she's written them for. But when I know when I was going through a really bad breakup, I started writing love letters to all the boys that, like, you know, I loved previously, who were my exes. So I think that is a super really awesome way to exercise those demons and that past love. So yeah, I recommend this one. The next book that I have here, the last YA book that I have here, is All American Boys by Brandon Kiely and Jason Reynolds. This one I loved so much. If you've ever read Jason Reynolds' work before, it's very impactful, and I think this book was just like a work of art. It basically follows two high school students, I think they're 16, named Rashad and Quinn, and basically these two boys go to the same high school together, but they don't really know each other, and they are brought together by this one event. So Rashad is brutalized by a police officer, and Quinn basically he sees this kind of violence going on, and he is kind of like holding this guilt inside of him that he never really stood up for him or anything. And it really talks a lot about race relations, racial profiling, social injustice. It just talks a lot about that, and police brutality. It talks a lot about that, and I really think this is a conversation starter. When I was doing my review for this, I mentioned that it should be on the reading list for most high schools, and I know that's such a big thing. Like, usually there aren't a lot of YA books in high school reading lists, but I definitely think this is the one that should be added. It sparks conversation. I was watching interviews with the authors who said that their main goal in putting out this book was to start a ripple in the community and just starting conversations in the high school for young people. So I think this is a really important book, and also it talks a lot about how the school community reacts to this violence, to this act of violence. So I think that's a huge thing, how they included the school so well in this book, that it wasn't just something that was going around in Rashad's or Quinn's circles. It was happening it was kind of like affecting the entire school community, which I think is super important when we're talking about race. So yeah, I definitely recommend this one. Okay, so the next few books I have here don't fall really under any type of fiction book, but I'm just going to mention them because they helped me tremendously throughout my high school career. The first one is Happiness Is by Lisa Swerling and Ralph Lazar, 500 Things to Be Happy About. If you were in high school, and everyone goes through high school, you know what it's like to kind of be really stressful at times, be really sad, and be really let down by your grades or by other people from bullying. So this book really helps me, especially since I dealt with a lot of anxiety and with a lot of mental health issues, especially with the stress work, and the course load was crazy junior year, and I felt myself getting really down most of the time. So I like to flip through this book. It basically just has like little pictures and then little captions that show you 500 things to be happy about. Some of these you may be very familiar with, some of these you may not be, and I just think that every night before I go to sleep, I used to read about like one every night. It has like 500, so you can probably get through one every night and still have some left over for the next year. But I remember going through this like one every night and just reading it and laughing out loud. It was just hilarious. Some of these were so relatable that I was just getting that warm fuzzy feeling when I was thinking about them. So yeah, definitely recommend this if you think that you are going through a hard time, you're feeling really down most of the time. I think this is a great uplifting book. So the next book that I have here is TED Talks, the official TED Guide to Public Speaking by Chris Anderson, who is the head of TED. So I think the number one thing that I fear the most, or that I have the most trouble with throughout my high school career, is public speaking. And I think a lot of you can agree. Even if you're the most confident person in the world, you're still gonna have fears about public speaking, not conveying your message the right way, and not it being perceived the right way. And this book helped me so much. Right after I read it, I automatically felt like a TED speaker. Like, have you guys watched TED Talks before? If you haven't, I'll leave a link down below to some of my favorite TED Talks of all time. I'm obsessed with TED Talks, and this really connected with me when I just saw this at the bookstore because I absolutely love TED Talks. I want to be a TED speaker. Like, being a TED speaker I think is like everyone's dream, and you always look at those TED speakers as if they were like your idols, and you're like, how did they talk on such a large stage like that but do it so well and so succinctly? So this book helped me so much. The good thing about this book is that it really takes time to tell you the tips and flesh them out. And also it does take examples, like usually when he's talking about all these tips, he refers to a lot of TED Talks that have been like the most scholarly and exemplary in all its years, and it's really good when he does that, because you can go back online, you can watch the TED Talk to see the example that he's referring to. So let's say for one thing, he'll talk about like not boring your audience. He'll talk about a TED Talk that was really interesting and that didn't bore the audience, and this has introduced me to a lot of TED Talks that I really love these days. And yeah, I just think this is such a good book. I still haven't finished it yet, but it just gives you some really great tips, and oh my god, like I cannot, if you really need help public speaking, I think this is a great book. It doesn't bore you. I really didn't find this book to be boring at all. I didn't want to put it down. It's because I usually find these like informational kind of books really boring, but this one was just so interesting. I think it's because like he's like the head of TED. He knows what he's talking about, okay? Alright, and the last and final book that I have on this list is On Writing the College Application Essay, Secrets of a Former Ivy League Admissions Officer by Harry Bauld. If you are applying to colleges, it's inevitable. You're going to be writing your personal statement, your college application essay that is going to be looked at by all the colleges that you apply to, and more specifically the colleges that you want to get into. So I remember when I was starting to write my college application essay, I was just really lost, because there is a plethora of like tips and online guides and videos about how to write your college application essay. I'm not even going to be filming a video about college applications essays, because I feel like everything that has been said, that needs to be said, has been said before, and you just need to reinforce the idea in your head in order to be able to write a really good essay. But the thing I like about this book is, first of all, the author of this was a past admissions officer for Brown University and Columbia University, so he really knows what he's looking for. He's read thousands of essays before, he knows what bores him and puts admissions officers to sleep, and he knows what he's looking for and what will extremely excite him. And of course, I know that's a little bit one-sided since this is only one admissions officer and basically you're getting it from his tip, but I feel like anyone who has tips to tell you guys can expel kind of what you do wrong in college application essays. And yeah, just another thing why I love this so much. First of all, it's really short. I think you can get through it really well, but I like this one because out of all the guides that I read and all the videos about college applications that I watch, he was the most harshest. Like, he is very brutally honest in his writing. He talks about things that he does not want to see in your college application essay, and he's super brutal with it, and he does not care about hand holding. He doesn't want to hold your hand through this process. He wants to tell you straight out what he doesn't want so that you will be pushed to write a fantastic essay. And I just want to read the back here. So what does an admission officer look for in the college application essay? If that's your concern, you're off to the wrong start, says Harry Bauld, who has worked his way through more admission essays than he cares to remember. Of course, he'll tell you straight out what he isn't looking for. So yeah, definitely pick up this book if you're looking for a really good guide. I've read so many, but this I think helped me the most because it was really kind of funny as well because it talked about like common tropes in essays. So I think this is awesome, guys. Definitely get this book. Okay guys, those were all the books that I think if you are in high school right now or if you are entering high school, you should definitely get your head start on reading them because they either really helped me or they taught me something about my high school years and how to survive it. So yeah, that's all for today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know your recommendations down below, books that have helped you survive high school or some like college books or whatever. And thank you guys so much for watching. Bye!